Hey guys, another video we're reading today is Collected. Another video. We're going to read chapter 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So a lot of chapters in this one. And I did get, I told Scholastic that I can, read it, and they approved me for reading it. So, chapter 11 through 17 we're reading today with the Collected. Long chapters, a long video, so get comfy, get some drinks, whatever you gotta do. Alright, chapter 11. Oh no, Mom whispered. We stood in the doorway, all three of us, and even though I had been here many times, it didn't look like the same house. What happened in here? Josie asked. Mom swallowed hard and didn't answer. Instead, she took a step into the living room, gingerly, placing her foot so as not to step on anything breakable. Because the house, was a complete mess. Papers and photographs were scattered everywhere. Grandma's porcelain collectibles were thrown all over the place. Some of them were shattered. Only a few of them were whole. The books had been torn from their shelves, pages ripped and strewn all over. I couldn't see any inch of carpet through the mess. Even the wallpaper had been ripped off in places. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the writing. All over the walls in black and red paint. All over the papers, all over the sofa. Even the curtains, every single surface was covered in the 4 words, "She must never return." I looked over to Josie. Her mouth was slack as she took it in. All the color drained from her face. She looked like she was in shock. Mom was taking it a little better. She moved deeper into the room, turning on lights, one hand covering her mouth. I didn't want to step a foot in that room. That wasn't Grandma Jeannie's house. This wasn't the living room where we spent hours talking about daydreams or my school. This wasn't the place that felt like home. Not anymore. Had an intruder come in? Someone who hated Grandma Jeannie? Did someone rob the place? I asked. Should we call the cops? Josie shook her head before Mom answered. No, Josie whispered. This was her. That was her handwriting. Mom, I asked. I wanted some reassurance. This couldn't have been Grandma Jeannie's doing. It couldn't. Well, Mom finally said. She kept looking around. Her face was stoic, as if she had been prepared for the worst, and it had come at last. The caretaker did say the place was a mess. How could the caretaker have let this happen? Josie asked angrily. Isn't that why she was here, to take care of Grandma? Mom swallowed and looked at us both for the first time. I didn't want to tell you, but when the caretaker called me about your grandma's passing, she said that Grandma Jeannie had stolen her keys and locked her out for a few days. When she finally came in, she found. She didn't finish her sentence. It made me wonder a terrible, horrible thought. Where had Grandma Jeannie been when the caretaker found her? I didn't think it would be this bad, Mom whispered, almost to herself. She took a deep breath and rolled her shoulders back. But this place isn't going to pack itself. Let's grab some cleaning supplies and get to work. We could pack once we have some of the mess cleared. I looked to Josie. Like me, she didn't seem to want to take a step into the house, even though the cold rain and wind hammered between us. It felt like the house was even more of a storm. I reached out to take Josie's hand. Our fingers clasped. Just for a second. Then, like it took her a second to realize what was happening, she shook it off and stepped inside. I watched her go. My heart dropped. Then I turned to the words I'd ignore, the ones I couldn't ignore any longer. She must never return. Who was Grandma Jeannie talking about? And why, with every single part of my being, did I truly definitely not want to find out? Alright, I do wonder who that would be. I think it's Beryl. I really do. Maybe she forgot about, Beryl, but yeah, I think it is Beryl. So we are going to continue to chapter 12, figure out who it is. Chapter 12. Before we could get to work, Mom wanted to change out of her funeral clothes, which meant venturing back into the rain and grabbing the 2 suitcases we were splitting between the 3 of us. I volunteered to go. I didn't want to be in the mess of a house anymore. Then I had to. I knew I would have to face it eventually, but maybe a small part of me, no, a large part of me, hoped that when I got back to the house, everything would magically be as I remembered it. The shelves all neatly lined with books and figurines and lamps glowing cheerfully. A tray of sun tea on the coffee table, and maybe even Grandma Jeanie sitting in her chair, waiting for me to come in. It wasn't until I reached the car that I realized I was crying. Fat, hot tea that poured down my cheeks. I didn't open the door. Not at first. Instead, I pressed my forehead against a cold glass and let myself sob, completely unseen and unheard in the pouring rain. Even though I cried when I found out about Grandma and at the funeral, I hadn't cried like this. It was like a dam burst inside of me, and all my pain and sadness and anger flooded out. Pain. Because this was suddenly all very real, even more real than the closet casket lid. Sadness, because I knew I would never, ever see Grandma Jeanie again. And anger, because she had left us like this, left her house like this, tarnishing any good memory I might have had of her. I cried, and after a few minutes I felt a new sensation, a tingling on my back of my neck that had nothing to do with the cold water trickling down. Fear. I sniffed and I forced myself upright. I felt like I was being watched from the woods. I turned and looked into the shadows there, and the tree branches swaying in the wind, and the rain, like they were laughing at my heart hurt. I stared for a long while, not blinking until my eyes were so blurry I had no choice. When I did, I saw a flash of movement, a pale white flutter through the branches. Not the bird wings, like limbs, tiny scuttling limbs. The fear rose stronger in the back of my throat, and once more the words Grandma had written all over her house came to mind, as if they were burned on the back of my eyes. She must never return. I felt like I should know who Grandma Jeanie was talking about. I felt like maybe in the corners of my memory I did. I quickly remembered the trunk that grabbed our suitcases. As I hurried back to the house, I realized my fear wasn't about being watched. Not really. When I got inside and saw the warning crawled all over the house, I knew my fear came from the knowledge that Grandma had spent the last moments of her life terrified something or someone was returning. And I knew in my gut that whatever it was, it hadn't come back by now. With Grandma Jeanie gone, it would soon. Chapter 13. It took us all night to clean. Mom ordered pizza at one point, but we didn't pause to eat, even though she often tried to make sure we had sat down dinners together to promote family togetherness. Instead, we cleared off a spot on the dining room table. Even the plates were broken, and those that weren't, she must never return written all over them, and grabbed slices, eating as we cleaned up the mess Grandma Jeanie had left behind. Josie had been entirely silent since starting cleaning. She crouched in the corner of the living room alone, throwing papers into a large trash bag. I noticed her pause every time she picked up something with Grandma's writing on it, as if she could read more into these 4 words than either me or Mom. Either Mom or I could. When Mom left the room to work in the kitchen, I went over to Josie and bent down by the pile of papers, as if my entire reason for coming over was to help her trash papers. I picked one up. She must never return, written on both sides with black ink. What do you think it means? I asked her. That Grandma was losing her mind, she replied tightly. She angrily tossed a small dog figurine into the trash. It was one of the few things that hadn't broken, but she didn't seem to care. You don't mean that, I said. She looked at me, and her glare was so angry, so full of hurt, that I actually leaned back. Yes, I do. The only good about all this mess is that it's going to make it easier to pack things, since most of it's going to be trash now. The sooner we're done, the sooner we can get out of here. And I caught it, the quicker flicker of her eyes, as she looked to the window, to the dark woods beyond the window. You know who Grandma Jeanie was writing about, I whispered. Josie swallowed. I expected her not to answer. Instead, she looked down at the pages she was holding. Her hands trembled. How could I forget? She asked. She looked at me, and the tears lined her eyes. How could you? I didn't have an answer. Outside, thunder rolled, making both of us jump. I took the moment to spring to my feet and head into the kitchen to help Mom. Anything to get away from the accessory glare of Josie. And the questions not whirring in my head. What did she mean? I should remember. And why, when I tried to think of my time here, was it all a blur? It wasn't until I reached the kitchen that I realized the true reason I had to get away from Josie. I'd seen her struggle in many emotions of my life, but I had never seen her so afraid. Chapter 14. The emptiness of the house hid like a punch in my gut. When it was time to go to bed, Mom and Josie were going to stay up cleaning, as they were nearly done. But when I started yawning, Mom sent me straight to bed, so I wandered upstairs on my own. Mom had cleaned up there, but the damage hadn't been as bad. I passed by Grandma Jeanie's room. The door was slightly ajar. I could smell the familiar trace of her perfume, but I hurried on. My speed didn't stop the ache from spreading, or the emptiness from hollowing out my chest. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of the loss hurt so bad. And when I dragged my suitcase into the bedroom, I'd slept it off and on for the last few years. I dropped it in shock. My room had been spared. Everything in here was tidy and clean, exactly as I left it, exactly as I had returned to find it. Every single visit. Did Josie know? I didn't think she had been up here. Mom surely knew, but she hadn't said anything. Out of curiosity, I went to the room Josie slept in the last time we'd stayed there. It had been cleaned up, but it was clear that Grandma had still made a mess of the place, although not as bad as downstairs. The books on the shelves were in disarray, and the bed hastily made. I paused in Josie's doorway, staring out at the woods glistening beyond the giant windows. Memory scratched at the surface, along with the branches scratching against the enormous window panes. I had slept in there a few times. I remember that. Remember coming to Josie to take care of me and to keep me safe. I had been scared of something scratching and calling outside. My windows, coyotes, the wind, whatever it had been, I knew that Josie had taken care of it. Now it felt like I couldn't turn to anyone. Before I could think of it further, I headed back to my room. Maybe I should have felt special that Grandma hadn't torn apart my bookshelves or left strange messages on the walls. In reality, I just felt weird. It was like Grandma Jeanie was singling me out, trying to leave a different message. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out what it might be. I changed into pajamas and hurriedly jumped into the covers, waiting to warm up. As I stared out the window and let sleep close over me. I tried not to think about Grandma Jeanie's warnings, tried not to let myself be afraid. It would all be over soon, and life would return to normal, at least as normal as it could be, when the only good thing in my life was gone. Chapter 15. I couldn't move. I stood in the corner of a strange room, a cabin in the woods, a room filled with cobwebs and shadows, a room filled with dolls, hundreds of them, all of them facing the walls, all except for the one right before me with her faded sundress and the smudged, triumphant smile. Her porcelain doll skin was cracked in a million pieces as if she had been shattered and put back together again. "Yes!" hissed a voice behind me, a voice I couldn't see, but I had made my insides squirm in fear. "You will make a very pretty addition to my collection, you and your sister." And then I heard the front door creak open and the horrible screech of hinges as someone came in from the forest beyond. A horrible laugh at the monster behind me as Josie came to my rescue. I wanted to scream, to tell her to run away, to save herself. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from the smiling doll in front of me. Couldn't scream, not even when the doll walked forward with jagged footsteps. Not even when I heard Josie yell out in the fear of the monstrous shadow crackled in triumph. Couldn't move. Couldn't save anyone. The doll came closer. Closer. Chapter 16. "Mom says it's time to wake up," Josie said, knocking on my closed door. I jolted awake, my heart racing so fast I felt it in my throat. Cold sweat dripped off my forehead. What in the world was that nightmare? Why did it feel like it had actually happened? "Come on," Josie said through the door. "Let's go. We got a lot of work to do." "I'm coming," I grumbled. "Let me get dressed." Josie grunted and stomped down the hall. I flopped back onto the bed, looked over to see my reflection in the mirror. Dark shadow ringed my eyes, and my hair was a mess, and the sheets tangled all around me, and there, on the nightstand behind me, the doll from my nightmare, her skin shattered, the smudged smile wide. I yelped and sat bolted right up, turning to grab the doll that I knew beyond any doubt shouldn't be there, should never have been in here. But when I looked to the nightstand, she was gone. Chapter 17. I didn't catch sight of the doll again all morning, but I could have sworn I saw glimpses of her as we sorted and packed things, flashing of porcelain and pale sundress at the corner of my eyes, darting behind me, the sofa, or climbing up the staircase. Every time gone before I could truly catch her. Every time I felt the chill across my skin that always singled something out about to go wrong. Every time my eyes snared on the words crawled everywhere, the warning that only Josie seemed to understand and refused to talk about. Eventually, I forced myself to stop looking whenever I thought I saw something move. Josie was right about one thing. The sooner we were done, the sooner we would be gone. And for the first time in my life, I was starting to want to get out of here as soon as possible. I didn't really know why we were sorting things from the storage anyways. We had a pretty small apartment in Chicago. Couldn't imagine Mom would want us to keep much, unless she was saving it for us for the future. It made me consider the items I decided to sort into the save box. For Mom to give a final look over, there wasn't much here that I wanted to inherit, especially since most of it was broken or scribbled on. A radio played instrumental music in the corner, but it just barely cut over the pounding rain outside. Hours had passed and none of us had really said a thing to break the silence. What was there to say? I think we all just wanted to get out of here so we could move on, though. I knew all our reasons were very different. "What do you think?" Mom asked Josie. She held up a tiny porcelain horse, a tiny pink porcelain horse. "Wouldn't this look great on your nightstand?" Josie glanced up from the pile of photo albums she sorting through, and practically growled at the thing. "That's ugly," she said. "There's no way that's going in my room." "Josie," I yelped, "that's rude." "What?" Josie asked, rounding on me. "Grandma Jeannie's gone. It's not like I can hurt her feelings. Heck, it's not like she would realize it even if she was around. She barely ever knew where she was." I expected Mom to say something, anything, because Josie was completely out of line. Yes, Grandma Jeannie had been losing her memory, but that was no excuse to be rude about it. But Mom was clearly not paying attention, or else she just chose to ignore Josie when she was like this. She sighed and gently wrapped the horse in the newspaper, then reached for the donate box. I think it was hers, she whispered, from when she was a little girl. The pain in her words knocked the wind out of me. No, I said, I'll take it, if that's okay. Mom looked at me as if I was speaking a different language. Please? I asked. I didn't want it, not really, but it clear hurt Mom to have to give it away. I held out my hand, and after an awkward moment, she handed it over. Josie mumbled something very not nice under her breath. Just loud enough for me to hear, but not loud enough to get Mom's attention. I glared at her, my anger rising. If she didn't want to be here that badly, she could just go. She didn't need to take out her fear or frustration on everyone else. I was tossing away papers when I saw it, a sheet of paper very different from the rest of the old newspaper's clippings. This one had a drawing on it, one I recognized. Two girls drawn in crayon, holding hands, surrounded by trees and a rainbow. One of them had brilliant red hair, the other one was holding a doll. I recognized the one with a doll immediately as myself. I must have drawn this, so who was the other girl I named? Formed on the tip of my tongue, Clara. Mom asked, did I have a friend named Clara? At once, the sound of glass shattering filled the room, along with the hiss of the radio as it suddenly turned to loud static. I jolted and looked over at Josie staring at me, her eyes wide in scared disbelief. The framed photo had been sorting laying in the shadows of her feet. Josie, be careful, Mom warned. She had to yell to be heard above the loud radio static. Come on, let's get the broom. And Anna, can you turn off the radio? She led Josie out of the room, and I had a feeling I wouldn't get an answer from either of them now. Carefully making sure to avoid any stray glass, I made my way to the radio. When I reached the radio, though, I could hear something behind the static. A woman's voice! No, Grandma Jeannie's voice. You must not let her escape, Grandma Jeannie whispered. Beryl must never be freed. My fingers touched the radio knob. Before I could even turn it, the radio went dead. Alright, that is the end of chapter 17, guys. And we will do the next video of chapter 18. See you guys in the next video.